the departments, how do we get there? Number one, we have great staff. I've had great staff for a long period of time, and we put the effort into that. We have really good coordination with our current CEO.
Excuse me, Mr. Geis?
Yes.
Madam
Yes,
Chair, can we
actually,
get some...
everybody needs to find a seat, and we need to have quiet in the hearing room here. Yeah, if you have to have a conversation, please leave the hearing room. Thank you, Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you. All right, let's start over. How do we get to where we go? I'd like to say this again, great staff. I really do have great staff. We have great coordination with our current CEO and their staff and past CEOs and their staff. The elected department heads, the appointed department heads, you know, I think we provide good support services. We get along. We've had great cooperation from your boards, past boards, and that's, you know, how I think our department is really successful. Even the auditor, I think we have a good relationship with labor. We have a good relationship with our retirement system, which is a big deal. We have good relationships with our special districts that we provide services to. I would say all the cities too, but I'm not so sure after the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies. We'll have to bring them back. And then out of this dissolution process, I realized what a great relationship the auditor has with the State Controller's Office and our State Department of Finance. Probably behind the scenes, we have really been a leader working with those offices on this complex distribution process, and really Ed Price in our property tax division has taken a major role in actually helping the State Department of Finance implement that. So with that, a couple of other things in terms of where do we go? You know, I grabbed a list of 20 pages of mandates that we have. You don't have that. I just wanted to mention it. They talk about mandated level of service. We have a lot of them. And they're all embedded in the government codes, whether it's the government code, the R&T code. I won't bore you with that. But the other thing that I just want to talk about, because we've only put some major accomplishments in the budget, we specifically want to talk about those. But I just wanted to tell you, in our office, we run 2 sets of meetings a month. One is called our risk meetings. And what we say is if you have a risk that you see in the organization or in our office, put it on the agenda. And then our job is to get rid of those risks. And we have now 16 pages of risks. And I'll give you a couple examples of what those are. And normally, to get rid of some of those risks, we have to turn them into projects. So then we run a projects meeting, and we run projects in our office, and they're generally long-term. They might take a year, they might take 2 years, they might take 3 years, and that's what we're going to talk about in terms of what some of our accomplishments there and where we're going with the budget. But I just give you a couple of risks, an example from our property tax division. You know, the first risk was the implementation of the RDA dissolution. The second risk is the continuation of the bills that are going to continue to say, well, you did it right or you did it wrong, or change it, and there's a lot of legislation out there. We're implementing a new property tax process. I want to end my presentation talking about that because it's a big project. That system is written in COBOL. Does anybody know what COBOL is? I kind of learned that back in college, but that was, you know, 35 years ago. We have to, you guys just recently did a fire tax exchange, so we have to implement that fire tax exchange. That's a workload. We have a property tax administration fee lawsuit that's out there that's kind of hanging, and we're not sure where that's going to go. In the dissolution process, there's a lot of controversy about ERAF and how we apportion money with the pass-throughs. We have SEO opinions that are saying some counties are doing ERAF right, some are doing it wrong. We realized that we had inadequate documentation for our teeter plan over the years, and we worked hard on that for last year. Our refund process, you know, our own internal audit did an audit of our property tax division. It says you lack segregation of duties in your refund process. You need to segregate that. One person can initiate a refund, and that's not good business policy. And one last example of The interdepartment correction policy of when the assessor makes a change to the roll and then I change a tax bill and the tax collector, changes the collection process. We know we can see opportunities for more improvement, especially when we implement a project. So what we've done and when we analyze those risks is we now have a Manatron GRM system project in the property tax division. We have the implementation guidelines for the RDA bills. We have the implementation of a lawsuit on Oxnard RDA versus Ventura that will affect us. We have a project to improve our redemption reporting and new procedures. We did a first report to your board this year. We're working to do improvements to our roll correction database, interdepartment tax improvement team, refund, make sure we're reconciling our trust fund. So those are just the risks and the projects that come out of one division of our office, and we do that throughout our office. So let me just talk, I want to just say that's how we run, and that's how we manage a lot of stuff. I mean, 800 million for the county, all the special districts. There's a lot of moving parts to our organization. So our budget is 7.7 million. We got a small amount of capital to replace some computer equipment. We're really supported by the general fund. We're a general fund department. Over the last 5 years, we've moved from 57.9 FTEs down to 45.3. I think it's tough for us to keep up with our mandates. I want to talk a little bit about what some of those risks are when we get to those lower funding levels. So let me talk about a few of the fun things we accomplished. One is we added functionality to the county's financial information network for budget revision request processing. That added clarity and uniformity to the budget revisions, and we automated the whole process, so it's all done online. If in the old days you watched my staff and the CEO staff, we ran up and down the stairs all day. It was good exercise, but they were all making corrections to the budget process, and we've now automated that, starting with departments, better standards, better instructions, and we can process really. I could show you the system, and I decided not to do that. We should come back at another time to show you how we're managing that workflow. The important task is we want to take that same process and have it available next year in the budget hearings. So if we're doing a final budget adjustment, we want to do that online, have it go through the process, and when you get to the end of the hearings, you can we can produce those final budget revisions so that we're not reconciling those for the next 45 days. And that's what happens today because the budget development database is separate from our fin system. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about, that we're transitioning, and we're already working on that. And we really have a group together with the executive group of the CEO that we're already looking forward to next year. We're really working on next year besides completing this year. A couple other great things that we think were good projects is at the end of the last year, working with the CEO, we had some salary savings, and we noticed one of the risks on our risk sheet was that the Parks Department was having trouble completing a reservation and cashiering system. They were kind of working on it for 4 years, didn't have the right staff. Your board let me roll over $100,000. We formed a project team, got some outside help, and we're successfully implementing that system today. We're in the final stages of rollout. That site is taking reservations for yurts, cabins, group sites, and we're just working on the campsites now and ready to roll that out. And that involves two things. You can go out and look yourself at the reservation system and see the sites, but it also requires replacing the cashiering system in the booths because they have to coordinate with the reservation system. So the one thing I want to give Parks good credit for is they selected good software. It's called Kamaba. And then we've helped them implement that Kamaba system, and we've addressed a lot of policies along the way with the executive committee that are also important in that project development. So I'd say in September we should come in and do a dog and pony show and show you really what that does. You can also, there's cameras in the booths out there, you can watch the actual transactions happening, and we've also put that technology in the transfer station too. This is a big project. We're working to implement a new property system. It's like a 3-year project. It is not easy to put in vendor software. This software is called GRM. We're investing $2.4 million. 5 other counties and some very big counties are also implementing this same system. But when you put in vendor software, that vendor software is made to service multiple counties. It's not up and running in any California county yet, although there's 5 big counties that have committed to do this. We think it's the right software, but when you put in that kind of software, you got to devote a large amount of resources for a successful implementation. I'll give you an example. SAP has been put in for financial systems all around the country, but if you go up to Marin County, they paid $18 million to put in SAP and they failed. It actually works, but they want to replace it, and it costs them $1 million a year to maintain it. So that's where you got to put the right resources here, and I want to show you maybe the lack of resources that we have to put together to get this done. Part of that we accomplished, we put in a virtual infrastructure, we're hosting the system, that's working really well. We're modifying and enhancing the budget system and the development tools, both for the operating budget and the capital budget. We consider that a 2-year project. So all the software that drives that is in a separate old set of systems that we wrote 14 years ago. And so we want to migrate that over to Fin and put that as the front end to the Fin program so that departments can upload and reload and put their budgets in easy. We also are initiating the planning for the replacement of our 15-year-old employee time capture system. That is written in software called DB2. It's worked really well for 15 years, but there's a lot of enhancements that we could make to the time card systems. One of the things we don't get out of our time card system is daily reporting. It's actually in there, but we just can't report it out. So how many hours did a person work in a day? We do it all on a bi-weekly basis, so we see that as a big enhancement to give some department some better tools over their work week or their pay period. When you think about the auditor's office in the long run, what we are is about maintaining 65 financial and accounting applications. We're a big automated department and we maintain a lot of systems. And so therefore, we got to make sure we maintain them, we got to upgrade them, and we got to keep them up to date. So these are just a few of our long-term vision of what we want to do. The property tax division, we're working to dissolve the 7 county redevelopment agencies and set up systems and process to account for and distribute property taxes to the affected taxing agencies of each of the former RDAs. We did it for June 1st. We're probably going to have to go back and reconcile the May 15th distribution, which, because of the law, we had already distributed those taxes. We need to make projections for the future, and we have some good projections that are coming about, and working with the agencies to keep that going forward. That's been a huge task, and what we're really hoping that doesn't happen is, while our staff and property tax really got diverted for that, did we miss something else? I think in closing the books this year, we're really starting to see the pressure that being diverted from other tasks, we hope we get that clean close. Our internal audit division, we updated the county's cash handling policies. We performed cash handling audits at county departments. We developed a county fraud policy that was approved by the Board of Supervisors. We completed various audits of department and agencies throughout the county. In financial reporting, we're working on this budget clarity projects. We're going to look to transform the county's proposed and final budget documents into a new format and hopefully provide more clarity, more ease of use. And so that's an interesting process to go through, and it involves a lot of policy decisions from the CEO and the auditor about how to get that right from the beginning. Because if you don't get it right from the beginning, you get to the end and your board's saying, well, that's not what we want. And we're going to check in with you occasionally on that. For our potential services, there are no staffing changes from 11-12 to 12-13 recommended. The recommended staffing level only maintains the same reduced service level. We're surviving. We got the right people. But, we'll probably have a discussion at the end of this as we were working on, like the LHCDC audit had to stop because we had someone terminate, we had to move that person over to the RDA. And so we haven't had a chance to work on that for the last 45 days. We're seeing a deterioration of our ability to provide financial accounting advice and support the departments. I'm seeing this more happening on our special districts out there. You know, they do purchase services for us, but boy, we're having a hard time getting out there and giving them good service. It really opens the department and the county to unforeseen errors, you know, potential late payments. When you look at who's processing my bills downstairs, it's 6 interns from UCSB. We're processing our bills with interns. We have a chance to get penalties. We can have audit exceptions. We're going to bring a report to your board in July where we've compiled all the external monitoring that is going on by other agencies for the county, and we have a comprehensive report coming back to your board. That's going to say, well, here's the status of the different departments and where we see over the last monitorings, maybe where we have problems, where we have warnings, or where we're doing well. We have a draft of that report. Maybe I'll send the draft out to the board before we bring it formal, and maybe you can give us some input whether you want it on the admin or the department agenda. You know, we put in that fraud policy. We say, hey, somebody stole a computer. Can we get around to that right away? No, we're finding that those things are tough to respond to, but we do intend to follow that up, and we're working on our department. The last thing we do is the department is requesting, as part of these final budget hearings, an additional accountant auditor position in the property tax division for the required duties resulting from the dissolution of the RDAs. The funding will be reimbursement from the statutory property tax trust funds, so we can get the money from the 7 trust funds to pay for that staffing positions. And we think that over the next year, there's going to be still a lot of work to do with the RDAs, because we need to proceed with the dissolution of assets, the remainder of the debt service payments, and we've seen a lot of legislation that says we want you to look backwards to the period of time when the legislation was transitioning. And so with that, just a little look to the future. You know, our department will have the same problem as everybody else. We're mostly staff, and of course we're looking at retirement, health insurance, workers' comp, and small increases in our salaries and benefits. How do we address that? We do what we've been doing for years, and we'll look to continue to improve processes, look for efficiencies, and reduce costs. And so I'd take some questions if you have any.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Geis. Questions for Mr. Geis. Supervisor Lavanino, then Supervisor Carbajal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you always do an outstanding job. I really appreciate all the work you and your staff do. The one thing that I thought was interesting, we had talked about during the year, and I just want to see if we're on the same the path, was the ability for you, since you're doing these audits, to go out and have subpoena power. And you had talked about maybe training somebody in your office at the time, but I heard you mention she's been pulled off and gone to RDA, but is that still something that we plan on doing?
Well, I think the CEO can attest to the yeoman's worth that Heather Fletcher, who is our audit division chief, and you know, she's a godsend, that she has done on the RDAs, and she is kind of leading that RDA effort. The person, we did have a staff person working on LHCDC that was making some good progress during April and May. We were also working with County Council and LHCDC, but we just had to shift her over and get these audits done. You know, we made the statutory deadline for the RDAs of June 1st, a reporting deadline to the state for education of June 10th, and then all the audits are supposed to be done by July 1st. We think we're in good shape on the audits for 6 of 7. Eventually, I think we should take our internal audit manager, and maybe probably just the internal audit manager, because she holds the right credentials to go out and get that subpoena training. It's about 2 weeks of intense training. There is only one other county, and that's the county of Los Angeles, that has embarked down that road. Los Angeles has a staff of 13 people in a forensic unit. They do things like, you know, they're the ones that brought to the DA their problems with the assessor's office down there. And so that's the kind of work they do. But I think we should embark upon that, that process of being able to do that.
Thank you, and I would be in support of that. I mean, for me, I feel like you're the policeman out there sometimes, and with all the contracts we've got going on and as much money as we spread around, and we saw, and it's not, you know, it can become a problem. So I would encourage us to move down that path.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Supervisor Levanino, that gets us back to the current grand jury report about, you know, their lack of oversight of LHCDC, and we met and talked about our response to that and say, you know, the recommendation is the auditor should audit on an annual basis every contract over 100,000. And I said, okay, we just need 15 staff. What are you guys going to do for us today? And I go, well, I'm not going to bring that forward, but I do take the grand jury's recommendation kind of seriously in saying that we strategically want to address their recommendation, and I think they have a good recommendation that we should regularly and routinely, probably statistically sample some of those contracts and try and get some coverage over there on an annual basis. So I think they have a good recommendation, and we just need to work with that a little bit.
Thank you. Supervisor Carbajal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Guys, I think reaching that balance of having enough staff to do some of these other things and yet still maintaining a lean department as you have done is really, I think, the objective. And how we get there and when we get there is obviously the question. But I wanted to thank you because I think you do a great job for the county. And you just put up there an example of a few things that you do for us. And you're the reason why I think we're in such good shape, because you kind of remind us of all those pitfalls. And I was neglectful early on in giving just the CEO credit for the budget that we have before us. I know you've partnered with the CEO this year in particular to really collaborate on the document as well as the structure of the budget and how it was presented to us and the public. And I just want to thank you for your role in that and recognize you for it.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Supervisor Carbajal. Supervisor Wolf.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Geis. My question relates to the RDA. And at the beginning, I think it was Monday, when I thanked CEO and mentioned your staff in working through this. I think your work is exceptional, and apparently it's been recognized at the state level. So I just think you've done a terrific job. I want to look, there was a June 1st memorandum that you submitted to the board, and it talked about the distribution of funds up to that June 1st date. And some of them impact, I think, you know, how the county is looking forward. I believe that the Fire Protection District talked to us yesterday about the utilization of those funds to negate some of their service level impacts. And the county is scheduled to receive a little bit more than $2 million. Is there assurance from you that these monies are, we have received them, they are in our accounts? There is no possibility that we might, because of court cases or litigation, that we will have to relinquish any or all of those funds. I did look at some of the, we'll get a report from Ms. Nisich about some of the legislation, but from my read, it doesn't appear as if that would relate to the funding that's already been allocated. So if you can just touch on that.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Wolf, if you popped up Finn today, you and I just did it earlier, you can see that we've set up a new line item account in the 991 general revenue budget, and we deposited $2.3 million into that account. Might be just a little bit different than the sheet that we formally transmitted to you. We want to do an update on that because the State Department of Finance, in no uncertain terms, we withheld some money that we thought maybe Santa Maria could appeal their bond payment, and they said, you need to distribute that money. And so we distributed the Santa Maria bond money to the taxing agency. So I think we might need a little update on that report. I'm not sure if we got a new one sent out. So we'll get that out to you right away and get it into the budget hearings. Okay. But that $2.3 million has been deposited as unanticipated revenue, and it has no budget estimate against it, so that revenue is in the county system. The state did something that only the state would think to do. They dissolved the redevelopment agencies and distributed $2.3 million to the counties in the current year and to the taxing agencies. But the cost for the redevelopment agencies, they said you don't get that money till next year. And so they did this really interesting accounting shift that, good GASB or government accountants wouldn't say you can't treat those differently, but that's what they did. And so that revenue, there is current revenue in the county that has been deposited. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mr. Geis.
Thank you. Supervisor Gray.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Geis. I can always count on my mic, I think. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I can count on you for great information. On the parks reservation system,
Yes.
what was, did we buy a system or do we lease it, and what's the cost of that system?
We bought a system called Camava.
CAMABA?
Yes, and I believe we got it fairly inexpensive. It was definitely less than $100,000 to buy that system. And it really is a reservation system and a cashiering system. And then, you have to reintegrate that cashiering system into the fin system, into the treasury system. And also, what's really prevalent now in the change in that system is we're going to be taking a lot of credit cards. And so you have to retool your organization about processing credit card payments. And some of the interesting policy things are, well, you accepted a credit card, the guy made the payment and says, well, no, I can't make it under the cancellation policy, let me cancel it. And, so we had to come up with cancellation policies. How do you process that? It's almost fraudulent if you pay with one credit card and try and refund them on a different credit card. We actually had that come up in the bank saying, hey, we have a fraudulent transaction. So you really have to, that's a big process about rechanging your cashiering system, the credit card systems. And actually we worked jointly with the Treasurer's Office to put in a new credit card processor that better integrated with the Camava system.
And you said also it can be used at transfer stations? And
No, that's not part of the transfer station. I was just commenting that we did put, for employee security and monitoring and customer service, we did put cameras in at the transfer station and the parks.
Not the system itself?
Not the system itself. The system itself is, Camava is just a parks reservation system. It's pretty slick when you watch it run, and I think we should come back and demo that for the board.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Maybe one last thing, Theo, do you have that chart up here? This is a chart, and you can't see it very well. If you want me to pass this out, because I think this is important for the treasurer. Maybe pass this out. This is a chart that we're going to talk about putting in Manatron. And if you look all the way to the bottom total line, we're averaging about 3.7 FTEs to put in this large new property tax system. The vendor is telling us to successfully implement in the next year or two, that number should be 10. That means that we're trying to put in this major property tax system short 6.3 FTEs. And if you look at the top of the chart, the core team, we got 3.5 FTEs. You can see that most of those FTEs, 2 of them are coming out of or actually 2.7 of those are coming out of the auditor's office. So we're marshaling resources, and we have a few more resources. We're trying to build our team to 5. But if you look at the treasurer tax collector, they really have a lack of resources for systems development. And this system is really geared towards their operations, and they're only being able to squeeze out less than an FTE right now. So I know you're going to talk to Harry and you're going to talk about some of his other funding problems, but I think in the long run, we really got to look at the treasurer tax collector and say, do we need, we're recruiting for a financial systems analyst as a replacement to add a FTE, But I think that me looking at their system, they need some more horsepower to develop and maintain this system into the future. And remember, you put in this new property tax system, we have to reintegrate it with Fin, and we had to reintegrate it with their front end, which is called a remittance processing system, which is their cashiering and collection system, and we have to reintegrate it with the assessor system. And so this is a pretty big deal, and I just think, you know, if you look at a risk environment, we have a lack of resources there. And that's where I just wanted to, and that's really up to date. You know, that last column is the number of people that we've allocated to the project for the last month. So, you know, that's just another way we're managing data here. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. All right, we will move right into then the Clerk-Recorder-Assessor presentation. Mr. Holland.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair,
afternoon.
members of the board. I'm Joe Holland. I'm the County Clerk-Recorder-Assessor. I'm going to just jump right in here. This slide gives you a quick overview of the Clerk-Recorder-Assessor budget for 12-13, the proposed budget. Budget continues a downward trend from 118 full-time employees in 07-08. We're now at 91.8 full-time employees for 12-13, or about a 22% reduction. This next slide here shows for 11-12 the significant accomplishments for each of our divisions. And you can see, I'm not going to go through them one by one, but all the accomplishments are focused on meeting mandatory requirements, increasing efficiency, and providing the maximum customer support given our resources that were provided. And if you had any questions on any of these accomplishments, I'd be happy to address those. Now, this next slide shows our 12-13 potential service level impacts by each division. As you can see, due to the continued reductions, we're impacting hours of service as well as responsiveness in both our recorder and elections divisions. Additionally, the impact upon the assessor function is particularly concerning given the significant increases in workload that we've experienced. We're one of the few departments where when the economy goes down, our workload goes way up with regards to assessment appeals and Prop 8, Section 51 reductions. As a result of this impact, we will most likely result in lower roll values and therefore lower property tax revenues for county agencies that would otherwise be experienced if we were more fully resourced. We have submitted a budget restoration request to mitigate these potential negative impacts on the assessor side, and I'm going to cover that in the next slide. So this addresses the assessor restorations. And just a brief background, since fiscal year 07-08, our assessor division has been reduced by about 11 full-time employees from 64 to 53 in the proposed year, fiscal year 12-13. That is again a reduction of about 20%. Unfortunately, during that same period, the division's gross workload has increased by 30% for the reasons I previously discussed. This has resulted in a 66% growth of workload on a per FTE basis. So we have submitted a restoration for the request of restoring one appraiser position at a cost of $105,000. It is hoped that this restoration will help at least mitigate some of the potential loss, which could potentially be anywhere from $3 million to a worst-case scenario of $10 million in property taxes to county agencies due to the cumulative impact of this 20% reduction. Now, looking ahead to 13-14, and this is in watching your budget hearings, this has been a consistent theme across all departments. Things aren't looking too good. We project for this department a budget gap of about $1.6 million due to the loss of $1.1 million in one-time funding sources, as well as increased salary and retirement costs. This $1.6 million gap represents a 10% reduction and would mean the loss of 12 to 14 FTEs for 13-14. Should the department be required to take this, of course, worst-case scenario and absorb this gap, the way that our department works is this gap would have to be absorbed from the assessor division, resulting potentially in significant delays in assessment events, again, lower roll values, and ultimately lower property tax revenues to schools, special districts, and the county. And the reason for this is that the reason for the impact just being just on the assessor division is a reminder that our clerk recorder division is fully paid for through the fees charged for the services. In elections, we've really taken all the cuts that we can. We have put in place the new facility that's helped streamline our process. We're in off years, we're transferring elections personnel to other divisions so that we're maximizing, or we're not wasting any efficiencies out there. We've reduced the number of precincts as shown in the previous slide. We're paying less for poll workers. We've really cut about all we can from elections. There's nothing more that we can do. When I have to put on an election, I have to put it on. So that only leaves the assessor division. So when I'm forced to take a departmental cut, it really impacts the assessor division. And that's pretty much my presentation for this this afternoon.
Thank you. I think Supervisor Lavanino, then Supervisor Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joe, I was just curious, with the movement to now vote by mail being, we've seen it gradually get larger.
Correct.
Is there any move afoot that would mandate it? And, when you say you have to put on an election, what's the cost breakdown between, we go out and we man and staff all of these precincts as opposed to just doing a complete vote by mail?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Lavignino, we're well over 50% of the registered voters now receive a vote by mail ballot 29 days before each and every election. There would be anywhere from probably 20 to 35% savings if we went to all vote by mail. Unfortunately, the legislature has just not been very receptive to it. I would love to see it. When you're putting on a poll-based election, you have to order more ballots than you really anticipate people are going to show up at the polls, because you just never know, and you can't run out of ballots. Ballots are really expensive. If we went just to vote by mail, we could order almost exactly the number of ballots that we needed, and they're like 70 cents to $1 each. There'd be tremendous savings there. One of the costs that does occur on the other side, if we did go to all vote by mail, the county would be required to pay the postage. So there's a little bit of offset there. But in working with the CEO, I know last year the county proposed the option of if a county wants to go vote by mail, let the county make that decision. And so I would propose that this county propose that legislation again to help us save money.
Okay, then one other thing. My office is right next to the elections department, so I do see traffic going in there, but I'm curious as to, once the candidates have done their filing, which could be done, I guess, in an appointment type situation, is it people coming in that are dropping off ballots, or what's driving the traffic there where we need to keep those offices open?
It's a multitude of things. It's people that have lost their vote by mail ballot. It's people that need to re-register because they've moved. It's people just requesting a mail ballot, an absentee ballot. It's all those things and a lot of other little things.
Are these all the little things? Are those things available on on your website, where you could go and click and request another ballot, or how is it
You can't really request another ballot over the...
It's tricky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we actually have to have your signature and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. So they could mail something in, but for example, 7 days prior to an election, we will not mail you a vote-by-mail ballot. You actually need to come in
and
and
get it.
request an emergency ballot.
Okay, thank you.
I think Supervisor Gray, I think you were next, and Supervisor Carbajal.
Mr. Holland, my question has to do with polling places. And the reason I'm asking it appeared like at least in the 4th district, and probably the 5th district also, they were averaging 90 people voting in a polling place. And is there a way we can have, I know it wouldn't work for the presidential election, but is there a number that we have to have? I don't understand that.
You know, that's another aspect of vote by mail that we've tried to get legislation to change. The current law says that for a precinct, you have to have 1,000 registered voters. Well, when you have almost 600 of those registered voters already voting by mail, that only leaves 400 that can potentially come to the polls. And then when you have a primary election like we just have with a 35% turnout, well, that 44% turnout, most of that turnout is made up of the vote-by-mail voters. So of those 400 remaining poll-based voters, you may only get 150 of them showing up at the polls. So I would love to be able to increase the precinct size to 2,000 voters, say, to account for all this vote by mail, for over 50% of the voters voting through the mail. But I'm not allowed to under the legislation. So there's another example of where we have to overhire poll workers. And for the primary election, you know, they were bringing books and twiddling their thumbs, and yeah, it sure did. Now, on the other side, in November, 4 years ago, we had an 86% turnout. And you get just as many vote-by-mail voters as you do poll-based voters when it gets to a presidential general election.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Supervisor Wolf?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holland, for your presentation. I'm most concerned about the assessor positions. So it appears that initially you were recommending the elimination of 2 positions, and CEO Waller, you've restored one of those. And I'm wondering where did that funding come from?
Chair Farr, Supervisor Wolf, that came out of the contingency. So when we looked at that schedule, and I can't remember the slide number, we had all the different balances in there, and we said there were some minor adjustments. It was on that schedule as one of those adjustments.
Okay. I'm wondering it seems kind of counterintuitive that this is a position, and, you know, while 95% I think sounds really good, it seems like that we need to have assessed new values on 100% of property sold. And it does seem counterintuitive that this is something that should be funded, that this other position needs to be funded to bring in the additional property tax that we may not be grabbing. So again, it just seems like a good investment to put forth, what is it, 126,000?
105.
It's 105,000 is what I put down there.
105,000 for another assessor to bring in approximately how much?
Well, it's hard to tell, but right now,
Just a ballpark.
Right now, I think we're at the point, given that I was at 34 appraisers, now I'm down to 27. So that's 7 people you had doing an average of 1,500 things or more a year, that now we're having to suck up and do it in other, spread it across the remaining staff. And so what happens is the quality of the work deteriorates. But I'm estimating that right now, had we been more fully staffed with adequate resources, we would probably be generating $3 million or more in a revenue that we're not generating right now because we just don't have the staff to do it.
Mr. Holland, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Anything else for Mr. Holland? Thank you so much, Mr. Holland. Right, now we will go to the Treasurer, Tax Collector, Public Administrator, Mr. Hagan. Go ahead, Mr. Hagan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm joined today by Kim Tesoro, our Investment and Debt Officer, and Rochelle Kimosi to my left, the county's Treasury Finance Chief.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I know we're moving on to Mr. Hagan, but, you know, should we fund that extra 105? I'm going to be looking at $3 million from the assessor. And if not 3, at least 2. Because that's I mean, when I hear something like that, it just shows us how can we not do it. But then I'll be looking for the money in the rears. So at least ballpark.
Thank you, Supervisor Carbajal. Go ahead, Mr. Hagan.
Okay. The Treasurer Tax Collector Public Administrator's proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2012-13 is $6.1 million. Our capital budget is $800,000. This expenditure is for the Manatron property tax system, which when completed will replace the 34-year-old mainframe system. Our county general fund contribution is $2.7 million. This funds 44% of our operating expenses. Since fiscal year 2007-2008, this office has had its general fund contribution reduced 25.6%. We were able to balance this proposed budget using $323,000 of one-time funding. The majority of that was savings from this fiscal year generated by estate fees and reduced expenditures. The department is proposing a budget with 37.8 positions. When you add in the administration of the county mainframe, this is a 29% reduction in our staffing level over the last 6 years. This next slide shows some of the department's 2011-2012 accomplishments. We completed a major redesign of the property tax payment website. Some of the new features added included improved bill searching, printable electronic property tax bills, and mapping integration. We issued $5.25 million of qualified energy conservation bonds, which provided funding for the General Services photovoltaic project on Cala Real. We issued $60 million of tax and revenue anticipation notes, which provided cash flow liquidity for the county, and we refunded $16.9 million of the 2001 certificates of participation, saving the county $1.6 million. In our Veteran Services Division, we processed 1,542 claims for veterans and their families, which resulted in $9.1 million in benefits realized in the county. And if you think about the multiplier effect of that $9.1 million, before a dollar leaves a county, it's probably closer to about $50 million in actual money that went through this county. This next slide lists the proposed service level impacts for fiscal year 2012-13 for the Treasurer Tax Collector. The Representative Payee Program, or Protective Pay as some people know it as, is an efficient and successful program. It currently serves approximately 250 alcohol, drug, and mental health services clients who can't manage their SSA or SSI benefits due to their mental illness. We receive the client's funds, pay their expenses, food, clothing, shelter, medical, and weekly personal needs. Due to their illness, these clients are often the community's most vulnerable. Eliminating this program would force clients to seek alternative representatives in order to receive their benefits. Potential impacts could include increased homelessness, involuntary hospitalization, increased number of conservatorships, and placements in institutes for mental disease. The Veteran Services Program assists county veterans, dependents, survivors in obtaining veterans benefits. The Veteran Service representatives provide immeasurable help to their clients, whether providing education, completing complex paperwork, or advocating on their behalf. This vacancy is a result of our retirement in our Santa Barbara office. If this position is eliminated, we would be forced to close our Lompoc and Santa Barbara offices and meet clients by appointment only, because only the Santa Maria position would remain. I understand you will have difficult and extraordinary decisions to make with this budget adoption, But if there is any funding available for program restoration, I would recommend you fully fund 2 representative payee program positions and restore funding for both the Santa Barbara and the Lompoc offices for veteran services. Our projected budget gap for 2013-14 is $187,000. Additional departmental funding will be required to prevent further service level reductions in our office. Looking forward, the Manatron property tax system conversion project is a top priority because property taxation is the single greatest revenue source for not just the county, but our cities, our schools, and special districts. The Treasurer, Tax Collector, and Auditor-Controller are jointly working on data conversion, system interfaces, functional design, and user testing. And that concludes my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions, and I want to thank Auditor Geis for outlining the importance of the Manatron project also.
Thank you. CEO Waller?
Chair, Supervisors, I just wanted to make note that of the very few proposed FTE additions that the CAO has, or CEO has in Attachment A, this is one of them because after we had discussions with Mr. Hagan's team and the Auditor-Controller, I feel that this is critical to ensure that this project be successful, and it is absolutely woefully understaffed currently.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board on Mr. Hagan's presentation? Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Gray and then Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you. Mr. Hagan, we've talked about this off and on. I think it's just critical, that we fund the Veteran Services position. And I had originally asked you about the possibility of having volunteers do this. And as I rethought that position, I was wondering if maybe we couldn't even do a better job if we went ahead and funded and have the position, but then seek volunteers to help with the clerical kinds of things, the phones, the appointments, the filling out the forms, the kinds of things, because I have at least one senior group that would really like to take this on as a project. It's not just empty talk. It's seriously interested in being able to do that. So I hadn't asked you that one before, so that's a new question.
Chair Farr, Supervisor Gray. Currently, what we've done in our veteran service offices, and you have to remember, we have no administrative assistants in those divisions. We lost that administrative position years ago. And so what we've done is the VA has a program called Work Study, and through a veteran's GI Bill, they can apply to work, and this is one of the functions that is approved and they can work in. So we get people that are at least a 3/4 time student in college, either Hancock or Santa Barbara City College generally, and they work in our office and they get paid through the VA. We just verify their timesheet, and so these individuals are generally the veterans that are working in our office, learning what we do, we have probably about 9 or 10 at any one time in Santa Barbara working there, and a couple in Santa Maria working out with Rhonda there. And they're responsible for answering the phones, returning phone calls, doing data entry for us, doing filing. So a lot of the administrative stuff. And then when we get an opening in one of the veteran service offices for a replacement, we've got a ready-made trained person that usually we can recruit from. And that's how we've handled that piece.
So I think the answer to my question is you have enough people to do the clerical administrative kinds of stuff, that's not the need.
That's true, yeah, and they're paid by the VA. To file claims, you have to be accredited, and it's in Title 38 of the federal regulations, that it means to be accredited and who can qualify. If you have a volunteer that would like to assist in that area and they feel strongly, they can do it through one of the service organizations, and there's some qualifications through that, that they can do it through either American Legion, VFW, something like that.
Would that help? Would that get more people services sooner?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Graves, certainly any assistance that we can provide to the veterans would help.
Thank you.
Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hagan, I was just curious if you could give us a feel of the load, is it, as it compares from Santa Maria to Santa Barbara to Lompoc. So I know the office is right there by mine in Santa Maria, and it's used very regularly, but how does Lompoc and Santa Barbara compare, like on a day-by-day basis?
Chair Farr, Supervisor Lavanino. Well, right now, Lompoc, we are covering 1 day a week by appointment only. So a lot of the people that would normally have come to our previous Veteran Service representative in Lompoc, which was Mozart Booker, are now traveling either to Santa Maria or Santa Barbara if they'd like to get an appointment within a week or two. And a lot of veterans can't drive. Some of them are homeless, some just can't drive, so they have to do it through the Lompoc office. And so that could be a month and a half out to get an appointment many times. But as far as Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, I'd say it's a pretty close breakdown between the veterans.
So what you're saying is if a veteran is in Lompoc, they can't go to Santa Maria, they can't go to Santa Barbara, and they want an appointment, they can't even get an appointment for a month or a month and a half? She's that backlogged?
Yes.
Wow, okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board? Supervisor Wolf, then Supervisor Carbajal.
Mr. Hagan, I want to thank you for your presentation. I also want to thank you for your recommendations as far as if there is money available, the projects that are important to you, because obviously you and your staff see the benefit. And we had this discussion last year on both of the pro-pay and the veteran services. We were able to maintain the pro-pay, and we did reduce the veteran services. And I think, and I will take, my responsibility for feeling like we didn't need the Lompoc site. And I think that's the problem that we have when we go through budgets, and that is eliminating programs or reducing programs. And, I've learned my lesson. And I realize now not just the importance of what it was last year, but the importance this year and in future years for veterans coming back into this county. And when I started the budget hearings on Monday, one of my principles was not eliminating programs that are working. And I stand by that principle, and I thank you for stating your preference as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wolf. Supervisor Carbajal, then Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you. And Joe, not to give you a hard time, but boy, with $3 million now, I can fund so much more, for $105,000. But kidding aside, CEO Waller, I would appreciate if you could connect with Mr. Holland afterwards to get a conservative figure of what that position would bring back, because if there's really a conservative but good figure of how much that can bring in, it gives us perspective as to the extra revenues that we might have. And then we could look at the various needs we have, such as the veterans services. I have been a recipient of our own veteran services here in our county, and I can't tell you how many people I have come across that have utilized the service. And I think with so many veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan and other theaters, I think it's important we really look at this issue and see how much of the service need we can fund. Mr. Lavanino had asked, I think what he was trying to ask, and I'm going to try to ask it as well, is what are the duplicated, unduplicated needs that we have seen, and how do those distribute throughout? Is it 20,000, 15,000, 8 in north, 8 in south, how many in mid-county? Just sort of to give us a slightly broader and insightful perspective, so that as we go about exploring how much or what we can fund in terms of the veteran services, we kind of hit that sweet spot.
Chair Farr, Supervisor Carbajal, I don't think I have the numbers as far as where the veterans in the county are located as far as the concentrations. I would say there's probably about 35,000 in the county. As a whole.
Madam Chair, I understand, Mr. Hagan. I was just getting to, do we have a utilization of, we saw 16,000 and so many of them came in at this location versus this location. Do we have that kind of data? And if we don't, it's all right. I was just curious.
I think we do have the data, but you have to remember the Veteran Service Officer would have more responsibilities than just filing claims. There was more outreach. But I think as far as claims filed by location, Santa Maria far outpaced Santa Barbara.
Okay. Thank you. That's insightful.
Supervisor Levinino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My follow-up, Mr. Hagan, was okay, let's say we did, when we were fully funded and we had people there, what was the average waiting time? I mean, now that we've got this huge 6-week waiting time, what were we when we were funded?
Chair Farr, Supervisor Levinino. I would say we would try to keep it within a week when we were fully funded.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Hagan, because what we had in the service level impact is a little bit different than what you have on your slide here. So for Veteran Services, what we had on the original sheet was .7 position. This is the one in Santa Barbara. Cost to restore was $73,175. But you're saying that if we also wanted to put back the one full-time in Lompoc that was cut already, that's an additional $105,407. So if we added those two together, that's $178,582 to do that.
Chair Farr, that's correct.
Okay, and then in your accomplishments, you talked about processing 1,542 veterans claims, which resulted in $9.1 million of benefits realized in the county, and that was done just with the 1.7 FTE.
That was done with 2 fully funded positions.
Two FTE. So, so if we had another one, we would be able to reach more people to get more benefits. I think that it's important to say that this cuts right into the heart a lot of what we've been talking about today when it comes to homelessness and the need for services, and in this case specifically for our veterans. So this is something I'm going to be looking very closely at as well. All right, we have a lot of wonderful veterans in the audience. I think at least some of them want to speak. Mr. Nesbitt, I'm going to do a little bit of agenda management here. I don't think that most of the people that have speaker slips in are speaking to general services. So, as important as your department is. So I think that we will go ahead and wait to have your presentation until after lunch. We will have public comment now on these departments that we've heard from: Auditor-Controller, Clerk-Recorder-Assessor, and Treasurer-Tax Collector. I'm going to ask for the board's indulgence. These people have been waiting a long time, so I do want to hear from them before we break for lunch. I think we have about 14 or 15, so 2 minutes. And I apologize for having to cut out people's time as I did earlier.
Our first speaker is Andy Caldwell, to be followed by Marcela Sanchez-Patanos.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Wolf just mentioned that her priority was programs that are working. I think you need to elaborate that or expand that as a board. Programs that are working, a category of programs that don't work, a category of programs that can wait, and a category of programs that are redundant with either city, state, or federal funds. And that would help clarify what you're doing here. We do find closing the Santa Barbara and Lompoc offices for veterans absolutely, totally, and completely unacceptable, and judging from what we're hearing from you, you agree. You know, the bottom line here, like for instance, you have Project Clean Water. We don't have the budget details to know how much is being spent on Project Clean Water. But the city of Santa Barbara has a dedicated revenue stream in the form of a tax going to clean water projects. Do you really need to be funding Project Clean Water? We know that the federal government and the state government spend millions of dollars on smoking programs. Do you need to be spending discretionary revenues on smoking cessation programs? There's a lot of things that we can discuss. We can discuss, do we need to do the Gaviota Coast Plan right now? Do we need to do the AB 32 climate action plans right now. Again, programs that are working and that are meeting pressing needs, especially those that aren't going to be met if you don't do it, should be priority number one. The programs that can wait, the programs that don't work, and the programs that are redundant should fall by the wayside. And you should have a hearing on privatization because your benefit costs are now exceeding 50% of salaries. That is costing you a couple $100 million a year. And the people are suffering. Who are your constituents? Your staff or the people in this audience?
Thank you.
Marcela Sanchez Pataros, to be followed by Leah Juniper.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Johnny Gray, Janet Wolf, Doreen Farr, Salu Carvajal, Mr. Steve Lavino. I'm speaking on behalf of Mental Health, the ACT team, Mental Health Wellness Center, and Consumer Advocate Coalition. I want to bring this to your attention to have no cuts for propane because I work closely with Dr. Oli with that team, and I work closely with Karen Jones, my case manager, and I need the services of propane because I get overwhelmed when I'm working on the field, when I'm working at the fellowship club, when I'm working with the ACT team. It produces in me anxiety and stress, and I get overwhelmed. So I ask of you not to cut the propane account, so I can still receive the benefits that I get from Social Security. Thank you very much, members of the board, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And, you know, I also want to say for people that looks like you're starting to come in for the general county programs, we are running close to an hour behind. So I just wanted to let you know, I wouldn't see us starting that before about 2:15 at the earliest.
Our next speaker is Leah Juniper, to be followed by Darla Kaiser.
It's me again. Are we talking about veterans now?
Yes.
Okay, good. That was my next speech. Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm still Leah Juniper, Deputy Director of CAC. I find it appalling that these men and women who risk their lives for our country come back to what? No support, a cut in services. Services were already cut from last year from 3 representatives to 2. Now they're being cut from 2 to 1. As part of this cut, the Santa Barbara and Lompoc reps would be cut. This means that all the vets from this area would have to go to Ventura or Santa Maria for assistance. Haven't they been through enough? I find this to be shameful. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Darla Kaiser, to be followed by Ann Gogol.
Ann won't be back till 1:45 to get a doctor's appointment.
We're going to go with Darla Kaiser,
Yes. Excuse me.
then Alice Read It.
Hello again, Madam Chair and Board of Supervisors. In our organization, there are 2 people who receive pro pay. If they lost their pro pay, it would be devastating to them. They would not be able to manage their own money. Out of this program, a cut to this program is attacking the most vulnerable population. If pro pay is cut, there will be a rise in homelessness and suicide. I urge you not to cut out pro pay. In addition, pro pay always seems to come up every time there's a budget meeting. I urge you to protect pro pay on a permanent basis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alice Read It, to be followed by Wilson Hubble.
Good afternoon, Chair Farr and members of the board. My name is Alice Villarreal Reddit. I work as the Client Services Coordinator for the Housing Authority of the City of Santa Barbara. I'm also a member of the Common Ground Leadership Team, and I serve on the Mental Health Commission. As an affordable housing provider, I work directly with low-income, vulnerable members of our community, including those challenged by homelessness, permanent disability, mental illness, and seniors aging in place. Many of these community members, including tenants of the Housing Authority and those housed as a result of the Common Ground effort, are dependent upon the representative payee program for ongoing management of their finances, including, and perhaps most importantly, the payment of rent that helps to ensure their continued and long-term housing stability. I strongly urge you to continue funding the representative payee program because eliminating this program would hurt those in our community that need our care. Furthermore, at a time when our community is uniting to impact the needs of our most vulnerable citizens, the elimination of proven programs such as this would be a devastating step in the wrong direction that could result in unnecessary evictions, involuntary hospitalizations, and premature institutionalization for our community's seniors. Also troubling is the fact that this proposed cut is coming before your board accompanied by various other proposed service reductions, including cuts in homeless services, veteran services, and services for those experiencing acute psychiatric crises. Collectively, reductions to such critical services would amount to institutional neglect, and the elimination of funding does not signify the elimination of need. I hope you'll preserve these basic services for our most vulnerable neighbors. Finally, I urge you to fully fund the consolidated homeless structure that is also before your board for consideration today. This item received your board's unanimous support in May and broad support from community stakeholders that favor a streamlined and coordinated partnership. Large-scale impact to the crisis of homelessness depends on increasing cross-sector alignment and learning, and we believe that this new structure will go a long way towards ensuring the efficient use of our community's resources.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Wilson Hubble, to be followed by Ellery Price.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Wilson Hubble. Once upon a time, I was a county employee. In fact, I worked with Mr. Geis to put together the solid waste division budget many years ago. So I really appreciate what you're going through now. I've been there, done that, and I got the T-shirt. I want to tell you that I'm also a disabled vet. I did not know I was qualified for Veterans Administration disability benefits until I talked with our county veteran service officer here. And there are many more like me. You see, many service-connected disabilities like mine do not occur and are not recognized until years after military service. And there's, especially with cancers and other diseases associated with things like exposure to Agent Orange. And I must tell you that the veterans of foreign wars and the American Legions and the other non-governmental organizations that help process Veterans Administration claims really can't do all the things that veteran service officers can do, especially in regard to things like education benefits, housing loans, and things like that. But I believe that, especially since I used to work for an enterprise fund, I can talk about it that way, that there is a need to look at the veteran service officer as a way of bringing money into the county. In the form of education benefits, and you've heard $9.1 million, $50 million. In some cases, it's very direct. If a veteran is receiving welfare benefits and then receives Veterans Administration benefits, they go off the welfare roll. So if you want to thank us for our service, well, you can give us some veteran service officers. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hubble.
Ellery Price, to be followed by David Smith.
Good afternoon, Mr. Price. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm Ellery Price. I'm Commander of the Disabled American Veterans. I am also an accredited service officer certified to file claims before the Veterans Administration. I work at the Veterans Memorial Building, and I see veterans 5 days a week. We need these service officers here because my load is increasing due to the fact that Mr. Langley is now on administrative leave and is no longer staffing the office. Mr. Mozart Booker has left a year ago, last, I believe, May or March of 11. And also, the only left service officer in the county is Rhonda Murphy, and she's driving to Santa Barbara 2 days a week to try to take care of Mr. Langley's load. This is unfair to her. It's unfair to the veterans. In this room before you, you have veterans, and I'd like those people who are veterans to stand up. Please stand up. And Mr. Lou Carbajal is also a veteran. Thank you. We have veterans here. I see one veteran who was at Normandy, World War II, veterans from Korea, veterans from Vietnam, veterans from the Gulf War, and veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan wars are within us today. These people deserve the finest representation they can get. Please keep these people, service officers, staffed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Our next speaker is David Smith, to be followed by Donald Aubrey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Again, I'm a combat Vietnam veteran, and on several points here. One is the money that these officers bring into this county is unbelievable. The other point is that there's so many things that we need to think about as far as doing what's right for veterans. You know, and that's just the thing, doing what's right. We all have our little stickers, support our troops. But when the rubber meets the road, you know, this is one of the events that supports our troops. The other thing, we don't know how blessed we are here in Santa Barbara County. I have contact with my buddies from Vietnam all over the country. We talk, you know, they're trying to still file claims. I say, go to your county service officer. And you say, who? We have that in this county, and it's such a blessing. I have friends that have been trying for years to get claims through, and no one knows how to do it. And trying to deal with the Veterans Administration sometimes can be a nightmare. So I would just urge you again, you know, you have a tough job. Everyone wants something from you. But this is something that, again, is just doing something that's right for our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Donald Aubrey, to be followed by Anthony Perez.
I'm Donald Aubrey. I'm a retired Army officer, and I'm here representing a very small group. I'm the adjutant of the Military Order of the World Wars. We have 63 vets living in Santa Barbara. Now, these are all retired or former officers, so I'm talking about a very small percentage of the total problem. We have 63 vets living in Santa Barbara, most with spouses. 10 are over 90 years of age. Another 20, probably 80 to 89 years of age, and we have fewer than 20 who are below 55. So I have experienced service by our local VA representative, and on several occasions, particularly with assisting widows or spouses to get assistance in burial services for the dead. Now, we're only one of several veterans agencies here in Santa Barbara, and I want to emphasize that probably the officer ranks represent perhaps 8% of the total military forces that we're talking about, and that translates right down into the veterans area too. So we have a problem. We've had wonderful service from the agent in the past, and we look forward to your continuing that service because it's very badly needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Anthony Perez, to be followed by Michael Kwan.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Perez, and I'm a Vietnam veteran. And I think you've gotten the message of how useful this program is, and the fact that it will also bring money into the county to help with that load that you guys are facing today. What has not really been said is, talked about, is what is the impact when a soldier tries to go to the Veteran Administration and tries to get his benefits, and how confusing and how difficult that is. In my example, in 1970, I was told by officers right away, do not go to the Veterans Administration. They will not help you. They will put every barrier, every burden in front of you before you will get help. Here it is 40 years later. I'm dealing with wounded veterans and a number of other organizations that are trying to help veterans, and the same problem exists. Our taxpayers' dollars goes to the Department of Veteran Affairs, and they continue to put up barriers. So I want to just show you how serious the problem is and why the necessity to bring on these people. The VA has 13,000 people processing claims, yet there's 400,000 claims behind at this time. The processing time, once you can get your file in front of them, is 162 days. During that period of time, the veterans themselves and their families are deeply hurt. In my situation, I recently tried the system as a disabled veteran. There's a program to set aside dollars so you can contract with the VA to help participate. It took me 209 days just to get my application submitted, and it only got submitted because Lois Capps made a phone call and said what happened to his application, which they had met, they had lost several times. The bottom line was, after they finally got it, I had to submit over 280,000 pages of documentation to prove that I'm a veteran and that I was running a legitimate business. And some of the things that you don't realize, if you're a spouse in the state of California, if you're a veteran and you're married in the state of California, that works against you because 50% ownership means that the veteran does not control his business, according to the VA. If you submit a legal corporation as an LLP or an LLC, the Veterans Administration automatically dismisses your case and your eligibility because it's a federal organization and they do not believe in the state legal organizations for incorporation.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Appreciate you being here and your testimony.
Michael Kwan, to be followed by Bob Handy.
Mr. Allen, before our next speaker begins, I start again to see people coming in for the general county programs section. So I'm wondering if we can put a sign out there that says that we're running about an hour or so behind.
Yes, and we can have staff out there to advise people.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, County Board of Supervisors. I'm Michael Kwan. I'm the Area Director of the Military Officers Association of America. And I'd like to put in a comment, too, about the Veteran Services Officers. Like Wilson, I've actually been in the pits and putting together part of a county budget for an agency, so I realize what you're going through and the difficulty of funding staff positions. But what is it? We're talking $178,000 for 2 FTEs. And I heard our treasurer talk about the benefits of the, what is it, with 2 FTEs, we processed 1,542 claims, bringing in $1.9 million. I came a little early and I listened to a lot of the public comments on ADHMS and those programs, and what I see is processing these veterans claims could mitigate some of the issues that we have in other areas. And I'd like to, yeah, sorry. And so I noticed that when we lost Mozart Booker and Lompoc, it had a very serious effect on the county's ability to process claims. I was hearing someone talk about how great it is in Santa Barbara compared to other areas of the state, of the country, and yet I hear about how excellent the coverage is in our neighboring counties of San Luis Obispo and Ventura County. And I would hope that we could service our veterans in the same way that they have. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. Next speaker, Mr. Allen.
Our next speaker is Bob Handy, to be followed by Daniel Aros.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Bob Handy. I'm the chair of the Veterans County Committee. I'm also the national chair of Veterans United for Truth, and also the co-founder of the Veterans Caucus for the California Democratic Party. In 2004, because of being the chair of the Veterans Caucus at that time, I was requested to meet a general at Camp Pendleton who was concerned about the problems nationally that his veterans were having as far as training, medical care, and veteran services, etc. And in 2007, after we formed, realizing that veterans issues were national issues, not any one particular party. Veterans United for Truth sued the Veterans Administration for inadequate care and the long time delays that they had providing adequate services for veterans. That case is now running between, and we're appealing to the United States Supreme Court. What we proved was that there was an 800,000 backlog in the Veterans Administration for services, that 18 veterans a day were committing suicide. We're coming up to 5 years of that court case, and there are 32,800 and some odd veterans will have committed suicide in the last 5 years. I listen to veterans, I go to veterans organizations and listen to elected representatives from state senators to congresspeople to all the way down to dog catchers talking about the fact that they really support veterans. But when it comes time for supporting the veterans, they don't fund the programs. I implore you to provide the funds for the 2 veteran service officers that we need here in Santa Barbara. Our veteran service officers are doing a fantastic job. But if you cut the programs, the program goes to hell.
Thank you, Mr.
And so I would
Handy.
really request that you do provide the funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Our next speaker, our next speaker is Daniel Arose, to be followed by Emily Allen.
Daniel Arose? Is Daniel here?
Then we'll go on to Emily Allen, and then we'll be followed by William Connell.
Chair, FAR supervisors, I started out on Monday talking about the need for a comprehensive and seamless system of care for homelessness in our county, and cutting the veterans representatives and ProPay would mean removing 2 important tools before that effort can even get started. You've already heard why it's so important to restore the veteran services representatives. Really, restoring the position to Lompoc makes so much sense so that, veteran services representatives are helping people instead of, driving across the county. So I hope to see that restoration. Cutting ProPay is another impact that I think would have disastrous effects throughout our county. Just recently, I went to UCSB and heard during their underserved street medicine course from a woman who works for a program in Venice, California that provides scattered site housing, permanent housing for people who have serious mental illness, who are the most vulnerable in that community. And with their program, they really found it was important for people to have a payee, and that was a critical step, not only for nonprofits that might house these people, but also private landlords who would be more willing to house someone if they knew that they would be receiving payment of rent in a timely manner. So the ProPay program really does, help people stay housed and prevents homelessness. So I hope you'll restore that program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is William Connell, to be followed by Mary McGrath in Santa Maria, who's our final speaker.
That picture's been in my family for 70 some odd years. Every one of the male Connells have served in the services of our country. If you do not fund these veteran service officers, a feeling of helplessness will come over these returning heroes. There's nowhere for them to turn for help. You've heard it all over here. It's impossible to complete the forms and gather all the records needed. The new wave of veterans coming back will be substantial. 2 more veteran service officers are not enough. Every single one of you supervisors should have a service officer in your district. Every one of them, complemented by Ms. Gray's volunteers. Great idea, but we need the veteran service officer certified. $9.1 million. Okay? Give us another 200,000. Let's make that number 12 million or 13 million, bringing it back in this county. Do not be penny wise and dollar foolish, not with the American veteran. We deserve better. And the group of us here, not 500. That was our idea floating around. How many could we fit in this chamber? I visited every one of your offices. Courtesy phone calls returned to me. I want to thank you. This is the time. This is now. 5 service officers are needed because of the influx coming back. 12, 13, 14 million dollars. Pennies for us to get millions coming back into our county. It's not a bad figure. From the Department of Defense, more veterans have taken their own lives than all killed in action in Afghanistan. That's from 2006 to 2011. They have no place to go. They're frustrated. They're downtrodden. We have to pick up these returning veterans and make sure, all of you, take a good deep breath. This is the most important decision you're going to make sitting up in those elected seats.
Thank you very much.
I'll have one other thing to say if possible. Thank you. The small investment, just a small investment, pennies compared to millions and millions that come back into our county. You're about dollars and cents. 5 service officers, not 3, 5. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final speaker, we're going to go to Santa Maria for Mary McGrath.
Good afternoon. I'm very new in this area, about 5 years. And one of the reasons that I decided after traveling this country for 30-plus years to settle in Santa Maria was because of the vital veterans community that we have here. It was very good news to me last year when I found out that our population in North County has substantially grown, and we now represent the greater population center. So please be sure that you keep our Veteran Service Officer local. I'm involved with the American Legion, Legion Auxiliary, the Marine Corps League, support the Veterans Clinic, and am associated with the local Veterans Collaborative, sponsored by the state, and with the stand down we'll be having in October. I only arrived in this room about 15 or 20 minutes ago because I hadn't even heard about the budget hearings until last night on the news, and today I ran into an employee who said, come on over, there's going to be a hearing and you'll have a chance to witness. I served from 59 to 63. I have been well served by the federal government, fortunately. But in my capacities with all of these different organizations, I continue to meet veterans of every era who are not receiving the benefits they're due. They don't know how to get them, and there's insufficient help available for them, even through the dedicated certified service officers and our employees. These last 4 or 5 professional service officers gave you good advice, and I certainly hope that you'll be able to take it and make good use of it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who came and spoke and gave your testimony, and or were here just to listen. We really appreciate your presence and your participation, and I think I speak for the board when I say that we've certainly taken all of your words to heart. So with that, we're going to close this part of our budget hearing. The board will be going on lunch break. We will come back at 2:15 and pick up with a presentation from General Services and then go right into General County programs. Thank you again, everybody.